you were there during the time of the first iPhone launch.
We had a thing where every single Friday, the email that we had to send was what weekend day are we working? And we did that for about almost a year.
Did you get to demo in front of Steve Jobs? How were you able to expand into multiple successful products?
When something is working, you often shouldn't be thinking about the 10 other things that you should be doing. You should think about how to invest in that thing better.
Obviously, in product strategy, we need to prioritize the company outcomes, but we need to balance them with customer outcomes. How do you go about connecting all of those different interests?
We want to be spending about 70% of our time optimizing for existing products and about 30% of our time exploring new products, where we don't want to just create every product that will be a modest success. What we are actually looking for is the products that are going to be a high magnitude of success.
That's one of your principles I read, right? The magnitude of success is more important than the percentage of products that are successful. Hey, this is Carlos, the founder and CEO at Product School. Get ready to be inspired by our next guest on the Product Podcast, David Myszewski. He's the Vice President of Product at Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a leading automated investment service firm based in Palo Alto, California, with over $60 billion in assets under management across 700,000 accounts. Wealthfront integrates investing and saving products to help young professionals build long-term wealth in any market condition. David's track record is truly impressive. He joined Wealthfront in January of 2019, witnessing its growth from $3 billion in assets under management to over $60 billion in assets under management. He's been instrumental in bringing innovation to fixed income, launching the cash account, which brought in more than $1 billion in deposits in its first few months and grew to $8 billion within 9 months. Before his tenure at Wealthfront, David spent over a decade at Apple, contributing to the launch of the first iPhone. In this conversation, we'll delve into his expertise in designing product processes that increase the chances of success, balancing the improvement of existing products with exploring new areas, and building trust through a smart product strategy. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, one of the fun facts that I saw is that you met your wife on MySpace.
That's right. I sure did. I had written a blog at one point on MySpace about a trip that I took over Thanksgiving, where I visited a lot of the national parks in the Southwest. And my wife came across that blog and thought that she would introduce herself. So I asked her if she wanted to have coffee, and then we stayed together ever since then. So we've been together for quite a long time at this point.
Who could tell that there would be a very specific use case that led to an entire new industry in online dating many years later?
That's right. I've always been an early adopter in many things that I do, and that was one example. Now it's quite a lot more common these days.
So how did your upbringing shape the type of leader that you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a fairly modest background. Both of my parents were teachers, and so I've always had the heart of a teacher at the end of the day, and I've always had a thirst for learning. And I think coming from Wyoming, probably one of the few people that, who's from Wyoming these days. We really spent a lot of time when I came to the Bay Area, just really valuing in education, trying to learn everything that I can. So whatever field that I'm in, I really try to learn a lot about the field. And I think that thirst for knowledge, thirst for self-improvement has always sort of been there.
And it shows in your track record. I see you spend most of your time at Apple and then at Wealthfront. At Apple specifically, you were there during the time of the first iPhone launch. So I would love to learn more about your own experience from behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was quite fortunate to have an opportunity to work on that, the first iPhone team. And, it was a very small team that really had a very high bar for each other and was always trying to improve what we were doing, asking for feedback. And it was a very fast-moving product. And I think there were a number of lessons that I learned from that experience. I think one is just how much a small, talented team can really magnify and move quickly on any product experience. I think another was just the importance of high standards. Everything that we did was, whether it was a schedule or a new feature, was really up to the highest standards possible. And then I think also there's no shortage of hard work there. We had a thing where every single Friday, the email that we had to send was what weekend day are we working? And we did that for about almost a year. So it was quite an intense environment, but it was a fast-paced environment in which we were constantly learning and iterating until we finally got to something that we were happy to show everybody.
How long did it take to launch the iPhone?
Well, so I joined in May 2006. I think the project had been alive for probably a year or two, maybe even more in some circles since then. But when I joined, they had all of us do a demo of the phone, and it was really like a user research kind of study where they were asking us to do a few things on what was, at that point in time, a big giant board connected to a Mac, and it was didn't look like the phone that we ultimately shipped. And in that environment, they had us walk through the product and do a lot of different things. And I was able to do a lot and kind of saw that there were some good seeds for an idea, but it was not yet a complete product. And the thing that I actually had the hardest time with was making a phone call, because I held the phone in front of me as opposed to bringing it to my ear, because it never occurred to me that a touch screen that size would actually shut off when you bring it to your ear. So that was actually the thing that I had the hardest time with. I was able to do everything else just fine.
Did you get to demo in front of Steve Jobs?
I didn't. My manager did at one point when we were working on the multitasking feature for iOS 4. I certainly heard a lot of stories from the demos that were done with Steve Jobs, and that was always enjoyable to hear.
And David, one of the things that iPhone became notorious for is also creating an ecosystem where other developers could be part of and build on top of the platform. Would love to learn more from your own experience. Like, how did that insight came about?
Yeah, so when we worked on the first iPhone, we really had to be careful about the features that we were building. And so we chose a very focused set that we could do really, really well. And whereas many other phones at the time had a third-party story, we did not on the first iPhone. And then the interesting thing is when we announced it sort of at Macworld in 2007, within a couple of days, we were getting all sorts of requests from developers to build a software development kit for them so that they could build their own apps. And at the time, it looked like it was one of the biggest requests that had ever occurred in the history of Apple, which was quite a long history at that point. And then what we did is once we actually launched the phone, we saw a lot of people who were, at that point, we call it jailbreaking the device. So they were circumventing the security in order to write their own apps. So they were able to write their own sort of app switcher to replace the app switcher at that point in time called Springboard. They were able to write their own apps, and they created their own development kit based on our internal APIs. And so that was a case where you had a lot of very interested people who were absolutely ripping an SDK out of their hands. And that was a very extreme version because they were actually hacking the phone, which was a pretty high bar, voiding their warranty, just so that they could get access to some other features that they really wanted. And then ultimately, we launched a software development kit. And I think one of the questions that was always around at that point in time is sort of what's going to be the killer app? We need to make sure that we have the ability for third-party developers to create the killer app, because some of the early hardware products had sort of one app that people would buy the hardware for. And I think what we've learned in retrospect is that the killer app was the App Store. It was that you could have the access to absolutely everything at your fingertips.
Then you switched to Wealthfront. And I see that when you joined, the company was doing around 3 billion assets under management, and you experienced a 20x growth. Company today is over $60 billion assets under management. So what are some of the highlights from that run?
Yeah, I think there's a few highlights. So a couple of things that drove me to Wealthfront. I think one was that I had an experience with a financial advisor who, they cold call people at Apple trying to get them to advise with them. And I finally took one of those calls, and the advisor had a really great conversation, seemed like a very smart, intelligent person. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, well, you don't have $500,000, so I can't serve you, basically. And I thought that was a little peculiar because it seemed like, couldn't technology solve that problem? And then what I learned from Wealthfront was that at the time, Wealthfront was in the middle of building its own banking and brokerage platform, which is kind of like the operating system for finances. And one of the learnings that I had from Apple is that when you create your own technology, then you get a lot of control over the user experience. And so I felt like with that kind of investment, you could really create a quality user experience. And the other thing is that, and I think this ties into the Apple ecosystem as well, which is a lot of times when you make these platform enhancements, they can compound. And so you work on a platform investment for one product and it can apply to many other products, much like Apple's able to ship the iPad because they took the iPhone operating system, and then they had to make some changes, but it was more like an iPhone than unlike an iPhone at that point in time. And so I think when you create these platforms, then you can really speed up the iteration of providing quality experiences at good prices to customers.
One of the challenges that I've experienced seeing companies try to become the platform is that they start being successful with one product. And then it's time to branch out and create multiple products. Hopefully, they can even create the platform that allows third-party developers to build on top. But in your case of Wealthfront, I remember when it started, they had this tax harvesting product. How were you able to expand into multiple successful products?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different, a couple of things that go into that. I think one is that when we have created a successful product, we lean more into what's driving the success of that product. I think that's one general lesson that people have with products is that when something is working, you often shouldn't be thinking about the 10 other things that you should be doing. You should think about how to invest in that thing better. So we came out with the advisory product, and then when we added tax loss harvesting to it, we were able to grow our client and asset base very quickly. And I think in 2022, we harvested $1.5 billion of losses. So we estimate that we saved our clients something like $500 million during that year. And it's just something that gives a lot of value to clients. And then what we did was we added what's called direct indexing on top of that. So rather than buying and selling ETFs, we actually hold the top largest US companies. And then because individual companies go up and down a lot more than the index goes down, you can actually harvest more losses. So we were able to sort of lean into something that worked well with tax loss harvesting and then do more with daily tax loss harvesting. And then the other thing, going back to the platform benefits, is that by creating our own banking and brokerage platform, we were able to offer a cash account for our clients. And I think we took some data that went into that. So our observation was that a lot of our clients had a lot of cash that was held elsewhere that wasn't earning a whole lot. And what we did is we actually and we thought that it was a good time to add to that because we thought that our clients could earn a lot more if they did it through Wealthfront. And so one of the things that we did is we created a product concept, and I can talk about the product process a little bit later, but a concept that had a lot of automation into it. So it would figure out how much of an emergency fund you needed, how much bills to pay, and make sure that you had the right amount of money in your account. And it turned out that people didn't really like that all that much. But as we sort of probed and tried to understand why don't they like this, that's sort of offering you a better interest rate and a lot of automation features, what turns out was that they really liked the interest rate. And so then what we did is we said, okay, what if we just lean into the thing that they like the most, the interest rate, being sort of a primary value proposition, and created a product where through partner banks, we offer a high APY to people, and then just forget about all of the automation. And it turned out that that really worked well for our clients. I mean, they really wanted the higher APY, and the simplicity of that product really helps drive interest in the product. And I think that's one of the things that people sometimes underestimate, which is by simplifying the product, you actually can make it a lot more successful.
So as I think about social media products, where one of the goals is first of all, number of daily active users, but also time spent by each of those users so they can be monetized through advertising. So you think about financial tech products, what are some of those key success metrics?
Yeah, for us, one of the things that's very different about Wealthfront relative to many consumer products is that we don't look at things like engagement as sort of an end in itself. And I think in particular, we have a business model that is based on our clients' assets under management. So however much money they give us, we'll make money off of that. And so they don't need to come in every week, every month in order for us to make money. And so this business model really helps align our needs to our client outcomes. So we really care about building long-term wealth. And so if clients want to invest a lot of money and then come back in a couple of months, that's totally fine by us. We're not trying to get our clients to take an action every single day of the year. And in fact, a lot of times in the investment space, if you just close your eyes and don't look at it, a lot of times that often creates better behavior than if you're looking at sort of the markets every single day. And so we don't look at some of the traditional types of metrics that I think a lot of companies do in terms of, how often are they coming back to the app? How often are we sending them messages so that they come back to the app and notifications? We really want to build long-term trust, which means not spamming them with a bunch of things that are irrelevant to them, and really focusing on long-term wealth building. And so that's really what our North Star is. And that means that we focus on, how do we help people identify the products that are right for them, given their personal situation and goals. And we want to create those products and then help people identify the products that are relevant to them.
So is it percentage of wealth a good indicator?
I think if I looked at the highest level, one of the North Stars would be the the share of millennial wealth that we're building over time. And, if we know that millennials are a very, very big audience with a lot of wealth, that wealth will grow a lot over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so we always look at how are we faring relative to millennials' wealth building.
Yeah, that leads to a strategy question, right? Like, obviously in product strategy, we need to prioritize the company outcomes, but we need to balance them with customer outcomes. So in your case, especially when you're talking about people's wealth, like, how do you go about connecting all of those different interests?
Yeah, so I think part of it is that we are really structured to be listening to customers at all times. So we have a very high quality customer support team that feeds back into our product process. And so we want to automate every question away. So if somebody's reaching out to our support team, we would like to figure out how we can answer that question in the product or create an even better experience so that they don't ever need to ask the question. And then we also want to make sure that we're always listening to customers in the products that we create. So we have a research team that's much bigger relative to companies of our size, is typical. And so we have a product process that helps us make quality bets on what's likely to succeed. And I think one of the things that we think about strategically at the highest level is that we want to be spending about 70% of our time optimizing for existing products, so adding that new feature or fixing that one issue that's causing people to write into us. And about 30% of our time exploring new products where the product might be successful or it might not be successful. But if it is successful, it could be, incredibly successful. And so that's how we allocate our time. And then when we're doing these exploratory projects, we don't want to just create every product that will be a modest success. What we are actually looking for is the products that are going to be a high magnitude of success. So if you watch baseball, we think more about slugging percentage than batting average in those products.
This episode is brought to you by Eppo, the next generation A/B testing and feature management platform built for modern growth teams by alums from Airbnb and Stitch Fix. With Eppo, you can increase experimentation velocity while unlocking rigorous deep analysis. From setup to troubleshooting to analysis, Eppo makes experimentation easy. An accessible UI makes it easy to dig into performance. And out-of-the-box reporting makes it easy for you to avoid annoying prolonged analytics cycles. Check out why companies like Twitch, Miro, and DraftKings rely on Eppo. Visit geteppo.com/product school and 10x your experiment velocity. That's geteppo.com/product school. So how is that process of investing in a new product or feature different than the average process in companies where they can afford to, miss, given that in your product, there's high sensitivity, right? People are investing their own money. There's regulation in place.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is how we define quality. And so we have a quality bar for money that I think is a little bit different than some consumer technology apps. We can't just break something. We don't want to. We want to make sure that we're protecting people money, that they trust us with their money. I'm a big fan of the saying that trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. And so we really want to make sure that when we do any new products, we are building trust with our clients and do that over the long term. Now, I think for a new product where we want to take risks is whether or not people even like the product. So we don't take risks on whether or not we lose track of people's money. That's not a risk that we would take. But we will, in general, I think many consumer technology products either fail or are just a modest success. Very few are a big success. And if you look at the successful companies that have survived decades, they a lot of times look very, very different over time. And so we're trying to find the products and make intelligent bets that do look very different over time, so that the company can grow. And if you look at Apple as an example, it was a Mac company, and then they had the iPod, and then nobody carries an iPod anymore because Apple did the iPhone, and then of course the iPod, the AirPods. So some of those, some of those bets were Fortune 500 companies with just each of those bets. Of course, nothing is different. Nothing was a bigger success than the iPhone.
Yeah, and in a way, the killer app was within the same company, right? Like if the iPhone killed the iPod, it's all within the family. The challenge is when you are disrupted by someone else. But like in your case, you mentioned the cash account and how it went from 1 billion in deposits in the first few months to over 8 billions over the first 9 months, right? Like this is that a good example of like a home run?
Yeah, I think it was a great example of a home run. And one of the things that we saw very early on is that the deposits into that account and number of people opening the account was just far and away above anything else that we had seen at the company up until that point. And then sort of we quickly tried to learn and make sure that we understand exactly why it's working and make sure that it's the things that we want. And then a couple of things that I think we learned is that one thing that was different between cash and investing is that people want to move their cash around a lot more. And so we really invested in the speed of money movement, and so that people can move their money quickly and with ease if they need it somewhere else. And then we also tried to figure out ways that we could increase the core value proposition, which was the APY that we give our clients. And so we launched with a particular APY, and then we really looked at all the opportunities that we had to really drive that number up, regardless of, and just looking at where we could give people, even if it was just one or two, like, can we give them just a little bit better? And that's sort of an example of leaning into the value proposition. And then I think one thing that we did, which I think has contributed to our current success, is that when the Federal Reserve reduced the interest rates in sort of late 2019 and then down to zero in COVID, was when we lowered the rates, we were very timely and transparent about the fact that we were lowering the rates and why. And I think that built a lot of long-term trust on both ends. So we built the trust of Wealthfront always increasing the APY when there was an opportunity, when times were good, and then when times were bad, we were so transparent about things. And so I think those two things really built a lot of trust. And then in this cycle where we had the fastest rate hike cycle basically in any of our clients' lives, I think we were able to translate that into a higher magnitude of success.
That's one of your principles I read, right? The magnitude of success is more important than the percentage of products that are successful.
Yeah.
I like that. Because sometimes it feels like it's about like winning as much as possible, but I think the depth of the win can be more impactful than the amount of wins.
Yeah, I think one of the, if you look at something like poker or sort of other investment opportunities, a lot of times it's hard to tell the quality of a decision by the outcome, because you may have some external factors that are not within your control. So we believe that sort of with good decisions, you can have a bad outcome. With bad decisions, you can have a good outcome. But what you seek to do is to try to optimize the likelihood that we'll have a high magnitude win. And so what we want to do is we want to evaluate ideas early on and discard the ones that aren't promising and lean into the ones that are promising. And we know that many consumer products will not succeed, but we're okay with that. As long as we're making good choices and good bets informed by quality data, then I think we're much more happier, and we realize that not everything that we do is going to be success. But if we keep doing that over time and keep trying with high quality talent and high quality decisions, then eventually one of the products that we'll do will have a big success.
Do you play poker?
I don't play poker. I did a little bit in the past, but don't have a lot of time for that these days.
Well,
but it's very similar to that, though, right? Because you get a couple of cards that are face up, and you can make decisions based on the cards that you see and the cards in your hand. And over time, the really good poker players will win because they'll recognize when to make the good bets. But you don't have all the information, so you can make a good bet and have a bad outcome.
Mm-hmm, exactly. That was going to be my follow-up comment. So I heard you say that your research team is bigger than average research team. So can you elaborate more on that and how you go about leveraging them to make better product decisions?
Yeah, so we really want to do high quality research on our clients to deeply understand the problems that they face, like how many of them have the problem, what's the magnitude of the problem, how urgent is it, how frequent is it? And so we want to get a good picture of the clients. And when we're thinking about going out about a product, I think we try to get some data on exactly who among our client base might be interested in sort of solving this particular problem. And it really gives us a way to recognize the areas that are interesting to invest in, as well as to generate ideas for the future. And I think when we have a good quality mental picture through both quantitative and qualitative data, then it really helps us understand where we can offer value to clients. So if we compare some quantitative data that we might see just based on how our clients are using our product or other products, and then pair it with high quality, as well as surveys that we run, and then pair it with high quality qualitative data, then it really helps us understand the market better. I think one of my big beliefs is that the world is immensely more complex than what anybody realizes. And so a lot of times when you're embarking on a new product, you have no idea how complex the space is and how hard it will be. I think there are a lot of founders, startups who, would say that they never would have started their company if they knew how hard it would be. But yet it has a huge outcome at the end. And so I think we use our research to really understand people.
I as a founder, I agree. I think being naive gave me an edge because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And then it was too late. In a way, I think approaching problems with fresh eyes is helpful. And I see the same happening in product. I mean, your background is in computer science. You work in technology. I don't know if you work in bank or finance before Wealthfront.
No, I think I largely learned through my own reading and personal interest in finance. But I think I can certainly look at how some things work in the financial industry.
Of course.
And I think one of the things that we're always looking for at Wealthfront, and I think is broadly applicable, is you want to find a technology inflection point that can create new opportunities that weren't previously available. And I think that's one of the things that when you can identify those and it applies to your clients, that's a good, tends to make at least a good bet.
So on the research point, one of the things that I don't like as a product person is how sometimes research can be disconnected from decision making. Feels like they're there researching, talking to clients, doing something, but then the product managers are doing something else and maybe not spending enough time with researchers or doing the research themselves. So what are some of those insights to really leverage research as a strategic part of your process when building better products?
Yeah, I think we view our researchers as a peer. So I think many companies might have product design and engineering as sort of a triad. I think we view research as an equal partner and data science as an equal partner. And I think that really enables us to have good conversations about what's the real world look like versus what our mental view of the world might have been, and understanding that through research, and then really treating research as a valuable partner that can really help us create the right value proposition to our clients. And then we bring that all the way through. So we bring that from making good choices about which products to build, as well as once we have a version of the product that we've designed, we really help refine that product all throughout the process. And so whereas in the early days, we're learning more about the value proposition and what people care about, that's really conceptual, but then we really have to validate the actual implementation of the product and figure out, are people understanding the user interface? And I think a lot of times that can create really good nuggets of information that lets us change our design so that more people understand it, or in some cases to make bigger strategic decisions or product decisions later on.
So is research and data science a peer to the product organization, or are they part of the product organization?
Research is part of the product organization. When we are working on specific products, I think we view them as peers. So we want sort of PMs. So we have the structure. So we don't have the PM as a GM sort of structure. We really have the PM as peers to all of these other functions. So research, data science, engineering, and design. And I think we generally view product managers, we tend to see that they're the most successful when they're really great at framing the problems, because that really helps and make sure that people understand the customer problem. And I think research is integral into crafting that experience. And a couple of techniques that we use quite regularly as technology has changed. One of the best things has been our clients will agree to record them when we're doing our research conversations. And so if people are interested in particular clients, they can go and look at them. But then our research team will often create highlight rules that really show particular takeaways that we should have. And a lot of times when you look at the actual video, it's just more impactful than seeing the same thing written in a Google Doc. I think just seeing the emotion on their face, seeing a client really articulate their problem and seeing sort of how deep it is to them or how excited they are. Sometimes when we're showing a new product, people will just jump over the table and really want it. And that's something where a video really conveys the message much more than anybody. And it's a way that we can integrate research into sort of everybody's decision making, because everybody can watch a 5-minute highlight video. I don't think you want engineers spending 20 hours a week reading every single session. So you have to find the right balance there.
Mm-hmm. And how about design? Where does design fit into the org?
Design is always something that is very important for us, because we're really trying to take some really sophisticated and detailed financial products that have a lot of very detailed, rigorous investments research that go into them, and then make them really simple to people. And that's a really challenging problem, because you have to understand how the product actually works, what the client's mental model is, and then craft a design that really helps clients understand it, and progressive disclosure that helps them understand the details if they're interested in more. And so design has, for as long as I've been here, been a peer function of product and engineering, kind of reporting into the CEO. And that's always been sort of philosophically how we see design. It's just so integral to the product that we want it to be a peer of those organizations.
That's interesting, relatively unique to what I've seen across the board, because a lot of product orgs tend to oversee design. I think elevating design to make it a true strategic partner at the same level as product and an engineer sounds brave, especially in a finance tech organization, right?
Yeah. I think in finance, there are a lot of consumer experiences out there who probably would not be a peer to Instagram. And I think we really want to be sort of the Instagram, the quality experience that people have. And I think that that's something that we really believe in, not just creating the quality products, but having a quality user experience that goes into it really is another way to build trust and to make sure that clients really understand what's going on.
One of the dark things of product management, especially as we talk about placing bets and taking risks, is when something is not working and you have to roll it back, right? Removing a feature or even removing a product. Have you experienced any of those situations? And I can imagine so. Can you share some of those learnings from that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we generally believe is that we want to, we want to create good quality experiences that meet our clients' expectations, and we want to automate everything. So when we ship a new product, we either want it to be automated or at least see a clear path to automation if we want to feel like it's a reasonable trade-off to ship it earlier. And so I think generally we're looking, we're obviously hope that clients will use our products a lot. I think one of the ones that was perhaps more painful, and I think was what we called selling plan. So selling plan was a way for people who have concentrated positions in their employer shares to sell down some of that over time. And so what people would do would be they would transfer their shares that they had earned, say or at a liquidity event like an IPO, they would transfer them and then we would automatically sell them down on a regular basis and invest it in a diversified portfolio. And I think that one of the challenges that we had with that was just automating it. And so it was one of those things where people used it, the people who used it loved it, but there was no path to automating it. And so we decided that we would spend our time elsewhere. And I think that's sort of a concept that I think is still interesting, but it's something that we ultimately decided that we can't create the version of the product that we think is amazing, that we can support over a long period of time. And so let's work on some other things. And one of those other things was the cash account. And so by focusing on the things that are likely to make the outsized bets, and sort of over time that will work itself out.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes removing something, even though it's painful and especially semi-successful, I found the most challenges when something is not a clear loser. So you still need to cut it at the expense of investing in something else. But how can that lead to something else? And sometimes it's even unexpected.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons that we just keep learning over and over is how much oftentimes you can make a product more appealing by reducing the feature set than you can by adding to it. And I think many of us as consumers have the experience of whatever product that we're using is getting better over time. And so I think we're naturally conditioned to think that, well, of course, more features is better, but it's a bit of a survivorship bias, because the products that are adding features are the ones that were successful, and therefore the additional features was worth investing in. Whereas something like the cash account, we had an idea for a really compelling feature, and then we just stripped it down to its most essential bits. And I think that's one of the reasons why reducing feature sets oftentimes works really well, is because it really focuses the attention and the clarity on sort of the one reason or two reasons maybe that people would use the product. And so a lot of times, if something isn't working quite well, I think we should ask the question, well, what if we stripped it down and created something that was more narrow? Would that resonate more?
Yeah, I'm thinking finance in general. It's just not the sexiest industry, right? For the average consumer. And now a lot of that is moving to mobile, where the real estate of the screen is just smaller than on a desktop. So the simplicity, it seems to become even more important, just to make sure that the user gets value faster and they can somehow continue using the product. Even though maybe the success metric is not the daily active user, you still want to get to the aha moment as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the things that has been helpful for us was when I joined Wealthfront, it was a very desktop-centric and desktop-first sort of organization. And that was very, very curious to me, because coming from Apple, it seemed like mobile was like I was using an iPhone 10 years before I joined Wealthfront in 2016. And so that felt very strange to me, that why wouldn't people use mobile in finance? And I think one of the things that I had identified fairly early on was that if you looked at the magnitude of what people were using it at that point in time, it was primarily desktop. But when you looked at the growth rate of mobile was actually much higher. And so I think that's another lens in which one can look at things, is growth rate as opposed to magnitude. And I think we're always really interested in investing the things that are growing rapidly over time. And at that point, sort of mobile was growing rapidly over time. And then when we switched from being more of a desktop first design to mobile first, it really forces a lot of decisions on, okay, there's 10 things that you might be able to show in a desktop view. You can't show all 10 things on mobile. And a lot of times that forces you to say, okay, well, what's most important then? And then you decide on what's important, and you ship the 2 or 3 actions that they want to do, or the 2 or 3 things that are really important to the product experience. And then that means that the desktop experience is better too, because it really focuses on the most essential bits. And so I think mobile is often a good forcing function to making quality decisions as to what's important, as opposed to throwing everything just because it happens to fit on the screen.
So we've experienced a few trends already. We saw the evolution from a single product to multi-product, evolution from desktop to mobile within finance. What do you think is next? Where are you placing your biggest bets?
Yeah, I think I'm a fan of the saying that sort of there's only 2 ways to make money: bundling and unbundling. And I think you're seeing I think a lot of fintech over the last decade was sort of unbundling. You had, if you wanted long-term investing, you would use Wealthfront. If you wanted to buy stocks for free, you would go to Robinhood. If you wanted a bank account that doesn't offer you fees, you might use Chime. So that was very unbundled. So you have a point solution from individual companies. And I think over time, one of the trends that you'll see is more companies that are bundling and probably some consolidation in the industry as well. And I think if you looked at Wealthfront, when I joined, we had an investing account, long-term investing, and our variations was IRA was the other variation. We've added 529 cash accounts. We have bond ladder product. We have stock investing. And so there's just a lot more that you can do to build wealth at Wealthfront. But I think I'm always thinking about what products could be bundled or unbundled to create even greater value for the consumer.
Well, thank you for your time, David. It's been great to learn from you.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time too. It's been enjoyable. Thanks.